Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into a really fascinating piece of legal armor that's built specifically to protect the livelihoods of folks working out on the open ocean. If you've ever found yourself wondering what happens to seafarers when things, well, don't exactly go according to the script, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to break down some incredibly powerful legal protections today, and to make it fun, we're going to look at it through a bit of a cinematic lens. Because let's face it, out at sea, crazy, unexpected plot twists happen all the time. But luckily, the law actually has a very bright, crystal clear safety net waiting to catch you.
All right, let's jump right in. Everything we're talking about today comes straight from a seriously authoritative source, Section 79 of the Gazette of India. You can basically think of this document as the ultimate maritime rulebook, kind of glowing there in the morning light, setting the stage for everything else. This specific section, it's entirely dedicated to the rights and the compensation of seafarers who have their employment cut short. It is literally the foundational text that dictates exactly how a sailor has to be treated and paid when their journey is suddenly interrupted.
So, I want you to picture the scene for a second. The sun is shining, the ship is sailing smoothly, you've signed an agreement for a set period of time, and then, boom, a sudden, dramatic cut. The voyage is just over, way before the date you actually agreed on. So what happens to your paycheck? What happens to your livelihood when the unexpected strikes like that? Well, that is the exact question this law is here to answer. Let's roll into our first scenario. We'll call this Act 1, the unexpected end. Right here, we are looking at those dramatic situations that are completely 100% out of a sailor's control. You know, those sudden twists of fate that literally nobody writes into their ideal script. The law clearly categorizes these events. We're talking about a literal shipwreck, the loss of the vessel itself, an abandonment of the ship, or even a situation where a seafarer is left on shore abroad because they're simply unfit to proceed. These are those intense acts of God that just abruptly stop the clock on your agreement. So, the absolute most crucial point here is this. What actually happens to your money? Well, the law is brilliantly clear and, honestly, incredibly optimistic here. It dictates that even if your ship wrecks or you're left ashore abroad because of unfitness, you are still entitled to receive your wages. You don't just have to walk away empty-handed just because the ship went down. Now, the law ensures you receive these wages based on prescribed terms and conditions, which do outline some specific periods where you might not be entitled to them, but the overarching theme here, it's pure protection. Which brings us smoothly to our next scene. Act 2, Sickness and Injury. Now we're shifting from the physical fate of the ship itself to those totally unexpected acts of biology. Life at sea is incredibly demanding physically, and the law actually shows immense empathy here. Subsection 2 states that a seafarer is protected for any period they haven't performed their duty, provided they can prove they were incapable of doing so by reason of illness, hurt, or injury. It acknowledges that, hey, sometimes the human body just can't perform. Subject to a few prescribed exceptions, this is a massive, massive safeguard for you. And the outcome of this biological plot twist? It is super empowering. The law explicitly states that a seafarer shall not be disentitled to claim wages during this period. As long as you can actually prove the illness, hurt, or injury is what kept you from your duties, that legal armor holds totally strong. You are protected, and you completely retain your right to your pay. All right, now we enter Act 3, Acts of Man. And honestly, this is where the plot really thickens. We're moving away from acts of God and biology now, right into the somewhat messy world of human conflict. So what happens when a voyage is interrupted by a dispute? Let's break down the legal phrasing here. Imagine you're out there doing your job, and suddenly you are discharged against the terms of your agreement. But crucially, there is absolutely no fault on your part, and it's happening entirely without your consent. You are effectively being written right out of the script against your will for literally no good reason. If this kind of unjust situation happens to you, the law throws down a huge safety net. You're entitled to receive all the wages you've already earned from the master, the ship owner, or the agent. But it doesn't even stop there. You're also entitled to due compensation for the damage caused to you by this unfair discharge. And get this, who decides the amount? A shipping master actually evaluates the circumstances of your discharge and fixes a sum, which you can then recover just like your regular wages. It's a genuinely fantastic mechanism for ensuring fairness across the board.
All of this perfectly sets up our big finale. Act 4, Calculating Your Compensation.
So, how exactly does the shipping master figure out this financial protection? Well, the law splits the timeline into two very distinct legal scenarios. In the first scenario, we have a seafarer who is unjustly discharged before the voyage even commences, like the ship hasn't even left the dock. In the second scenario, we have a seafarer discharged after the commencement of the voyage. And as you'll see, the legal limits are entirely different for these two scenes.
Let's take a look at that first scenario. If you're discharged without your fault or consent before the voyage actually commences, the maximum compensation payable under subsection 3 won't exceed 1 month's wages. It definitely recognizes the inconvenience and the fact that a contract was broken, but it bounds the damage to a single month's pay simply because the journey hadn't even begun yet.
But let's flash forward to that second scenario. If you are unjustly discharged after the voyage has already commenced, well, the stakes are way higher. You're likely stranded, your life is severely disrupted, and the law absolutely reflects that reality. In this case, the compensation shall not exceed 3 months' wages. That is a truly triumphant safety net that actually scales up based on just how severe the disruption to your life and work really is.
So, we've seen the whole script today, from shipwrecks and injuries to totally unjust dismissals. Section 79 provides this incredibly bright, structured path to ensure seafarers are financially protected. It takes these potential tragedies and turns them into manageable, regulated situations where your livelihood is actually defended. The rules are clear, the compensation limits are set in stone, and the armor is ready to go. So the only real question left to ask is, when the unexpected inevitably strikes out on the open water, will you know your legal armor well enough to actually use it? Think about that for a second. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and stay safe out there.